Hello and welcome to Scene Partner, a new show from Off Book. Today I am joined by somebody I've worked with before and somebody I had great fun working with on a tour of Christmas Carol a few years back. I'm joined by Ryan O'Grady. Ryan, hello, how are you?
Hello, Martin. This is the first time I've seen you since that tour, way back in the
Yeah,
end of 2016, if you can
my
believe
my
it.
final memory of seeing you was running into, I want to say, Dover train station.
That's the one. That's it. Dover Priory. It's the only time I've been to that train station. It sticks long in my memory. My first professional gig.
It was weird going back. I think I'm right in saying, and my memory may have been merging. It was weird going back to digs without one of the cast, because I think
Yeah,
Lucy and I ended up going into the digs before we headed back home.
yeah, sounds
Yes,
about right.
but thank you for joining me. It's good to see you. Good to have a chat with you.
Thank you for having me.
What I ask everybody to do, and I found that in recording these episodes, I'm inevitably reeling off a very long list of what people's jobs descriptions are. In this industry, we all tend to be quite multi-talented and have loads of different skills. So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody as a first question. When you meet a new person, how do you describe what you do as a job?
So mine splits down the middle, really. And circumstances dictate which one I do more than the other. I'm an actor and I'm an accent coach. So in normal times, which we are not in at time of recording, the acting is the main body of my work. I do a lot of work in immersive settings, and I do a lot of work with kids. So my day jobs involve things like performing these immersive little jungle tours for children, which is sort of like a crystal maze game style performance, very much an interactive and immersive and improvised thing. I do a lot of murder mystery performances in the evenings. I do afternoon tea gigs that are set in a potions classroom. So I'm the potions master, teaching them how to make all of these concoctions that they get to eat and drink after. And of course, I try and work in as much stage and film work around that as I can. There's a voice acting element to it as well. You can probably see by the microphone I'm using. You can see the corner over here of my little soundproof setup. It's not as good as it should be, so I haven't got as much voice acting stuff under my belt as I would like. That's something I'd really like to build on. The other half of that is the accent coaching, which, as I say, in these times at the moment where the acting work is very, very limited, is something that I've been pushing on a little bit harder. So that is, I run hour-long sessions, generally going up in half-hour increments. Most people book hour-long sessions, and we look at whatever accent they want to look at, whatever accent they've been asked to do for a self-tape. Sometimes people will approach me because they just want to learn it. Sometimes there's not pressure, but kind of there's it's been impressed onto them by their agent how important it is for them to have a certain one, especially if it matches their casting. At the moment, general American accents are massive, especially for children. And sometimes people will come to me and go, I have a self-tape due in 2 days' time in this accent. I've never done it before. And then we won't focus so much on the fundamentals of an accent at that point. We'll just go, how do we say this in the accent? And then if they get the role, perhaps, and they've got more lines, we'll go, this is how you apply it. So yeah, that's the two halves of what I do.
So, how did you get started with the voice accent work? How did you train for that? Did you discover that that's something you had a natural aptitude for? Because I've seen both sides of voice tutors and voice coaches and accent teachers, people who've trained and know the mechanics of the voice, and then people who've come to it quite naturally. How did you come to voice work?
It's sort of a mix of the two for me. I haven't got a specific qualification in the voice. I did a lot of work on the voice in modules at my university. I studied at Exeter University, did drama there, graduated in 2016, the same year I toured with you. And it was a natural aptitude for accents. And the modules that I worked on at university kind of spurred me to study that in a little bit more detail. So I've got the working knowledge of phonetics. I know about placement. I know about what a long vowel is compared to a short vowel, which sounds very obvious, but in context, it can be quite difficult to distinguish between them. And yeah, it was sort of, I enjoy performing in accents a lot. I love performing in accents. And it's something that I think everyone should have access to. If not, I'm not saying everybody should be able to do lots of accents, because some people really struggle with it. But I think that it's something people should be able to approach. And even if it's a one-off for a film and you have one line in a film and you have to say it in a different accent, people shouldn't be afraid to approach that. So I thought, if I can find a way to accessibly learn it, then in theory I can accessibly teach it.
I mean, it's one of those, as one of those people who really struggles, I tend to be in awe of anybody who has that ability to assimilate accents and to reproduce them quite well. It takes me a lot of hard work, unfortunately.
I have a lot of clients who say that, and often it is just a case of people tend to go a little bit too far into the process at the first juncture. If you break everything down to the absolute fundamentals, it's like learning to speak again. It does feel very strange at first. But if you break everything down to the smallest level you can, and then go from there, and it becomes a much more natural progression. It's how you approach it.
And how then do you find most of your work, given that you have this big split in what you do, the two sides of it? Do you find that you're, as a more traditional actor, for example, might be relying quite heavily on an agent to find them work? Do you find that that's where you're finding your work, or are you more entrepreneurial in the way you approach finding work, in that you're out there creating it and looking for it yourself?
Well, the accent work tends to be totally separate to the acting work. Obviously, they complement each other in what they are and what they mean, what they do. But I don't think there are any jobs I've worked on where one side has got me the other side, so to speak. So the accent coaching is independent of my agent. That's all self-promoted and self-made. The acting side it's split. I do have an agent who has got me work in the past, but I don't solely rely on my agent. I'm usually looking for things myself. And if my agent gives me something brilliant, fantastic. But I've always got a baseline of work. So those jobs I mentioned before, those immersive jobs, are sort of the bread and butter. And then anything my agent gives me on top of that is brilliant. And anything that I can find, especially film-wise, outside of that is great too.
And if there was somebody out there then who wanted to do what you're doing, do you have any advice or any thoughts that you go, well, I fell into this little pitfall here, and maybe this is the way to navigate around it? Are there any thoughts you have on how you would advise somebody wanting to do what you do?
On the accent side of things, I would say read the books and listen. It sounds really obvious again, but it's absolutely key. Listen as much as possible. Listen to people with the accent. As an accent coach, you can be the best accent coach in the world, but your information is still secondhand. You're still relaying, this sounds like this, and not, this is how I sound. So you will be passing on information. You won't be the original source. So yeah, read all the books, get as much theory in you as you can, because it makes it that much easier to explain why you're telling someone to say this instead of this. It's very easy to say, instead of doing a lot of the American stuff, instead of saying harder, say harder. It's very easy to say that. And if they say why, you need to be able to explain why. On the acting side of things, I don't think it's a pitfall I fell into necessarily, because when I moved to London, where I live now, I had to work. Somehow I had to work. So I did take anything that came my way. And there are some actors that would not necessarily have done lots of TIE work. And even the jobs that I mentioned before, the immersive jobs, the kind of more corporate centered jobs, improv, murder mysteries and things like that. And my advice to someone at least starting out in the industry would be, do as much as you can, because you'd be surprised what those little, in many cases, corporate jobs will give you in terms of skills. They will teach you how to improvise. They will teach you how to liaise with clients. The jobs that I did with you with the Christmas Carol was with a cast of 3, and the 3 of us alternately liaised with the teacher, said, where's our hall? Where are we going? Started unpacking set, started getting seats put up for audience, and you just rotate around each other. So as much as possible, every single actor is looking for roles where they turn up on a film set, do their lines and leave. That is, as much as we enjoy the lines and we talk about building characters, the pragmatic side of what we do is we turn up, say the stuff, and go home. But I would say, as much as possible, look for the work that has more attached to it, because it will be harder. But once you've done that, you know how to do that. Working with you and putting up our sets within, we were only touring for about 6 weeks. I think with you it was slightly less because you came in later.
Yeah,
But we worked
5
out
weeks, I think.
we assembled that whole hinged panel set thing in 5 minutes or so with all the props out, all of our costumes laid out. So you, in the scope of a bigger production, that's the job of a team of 10, 20, 30, 40 people. So if nothing else, when you do get that job, and I hope that all the actors out there do get that big theatre job or that big film job, you can go to the crew, contract permitting. Some contracts will say actors stay separate, but you can go to the crew and say, can I help with anything? Do you want me to set my props out to save you 5 minutes? You know, even if it's just asking if anyone wants a drink while they're setting out props and all of this. It's just getting a kind of idea of that do as much as you can spirit, because it will get you, if not more work, a better reputation at least, and a wider skill set.
It's one of those I did a tour with the same company after doing Christmas Carol with you and Lucy, our colleague, and we never replicated the speed with which we were able to set or build our set. Of course, that set was slightly more complex, but no, I think we got into quite a flow. And I mean, on the subject of Christmas Carol, there is then a question I have, and again, it seems to be a common thing. You get actors together in the pub after a show or in any kind of social environment, and sooner or later, I find that the wacky stories start flying. I have found myself doing some crazy things, and one of the memories from that is, I want to say, driving through pitch black lanes with a musical blaring because we all feel like we're losing our sanity in the middle of goodness only knows where. You know, that's one of those moments you look back on and you go, did that actually happen, or did I dream it? Because it seems a bit bonkers. But professionally, is there anything that you found yourself doing that an ordinary person, a person not in the industry, would think, you did what? That they would find unbelievable. Is there anything you could think of that you've done where you've had to catch yourself like that?
I think there are two main ones. One is more explosive, literally, and I'll explain that in a minute. The first one was one of those murder mystery gigs. Now, normally these take place in restaurants or places like that, members clubs. And normally it's in the evening. It's with a mainly adult audience. It works around a 3-course meal. It's with a company called Moonstone that I work at. Fantastic company. If you see any of their stuff, absolutely go for it, because they're a fantastic company. This case, it was a morning show, and it was booked for a group of children, which instantly was two aspects that were slightly different. And then Sam, who runs the company, told us, oh, they're French children, but don't worry, their English is brilliant. And we got there, and they clearly understood what was going on with the show, weren't as English literate as we thought they might be. And me being relatively conversational in French, and the only one of the cast that was, ended up explaining the plot to most of them in French again. And there was a point after about the 6th or 7th table of children where I went, I am currently telling this group of 14-year-olds about a fictional murder in which I have to insist I'm innocent, probably getting the French wrong, and not quite knowing if I'm walking away going, I assume they understood that, and then going, I'm not quite sure why this is my job or how it's become my job. The other one, I'm aware I'm rambling a little bit, so I'll keep it a little bit quicker.
No.
The last summer, I was touring a science and magic show called Spells, which goes to lots of haven camps, and we split into 4 teams in, I think it was the Southwest, Wales, Scotland, and I was in Yorkshire. There might have been another team. And part of that, I was the scientist character, Doc. And one of the finale elements of the show was we would ignite balloons, which were filled with hydrogen, and then hydrogen, then hydrogen with a bit of oxygen, and then half hydrogen, half oxygen. The explosions would get progressively bigger. And on I think it was our 39th show of 42, no accidents until then, I lit the balloon, which did its first balloon of the 3, the smallest explosion, lit the balloon, did its usual explosion. And as I'm taking my arm is outstretched like this with the staff in it, the fire staff, I move my arm away and turn to extinguish it. And the roof tile just here comes right down and lands about a foot away from me. and we end the show early. We do our emergency show stop. And at that point, I kind of went, they say about when you perform in a venue, bring the ceiling down, but I don't think that's exactly what they meant.
Not quite as literal as actually happens.
No, it's not as exciting when it actually happens.
No, but again, that's the kind of, for me, that's the magic of theatre, I think, and specifically live entertainment is.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen from moment to moment. You don't know. You don't know whether you're going to get that audience who are going to laugh in all the right places and bolster your energy, or whether you're going to have that audience who just sit there stone-faced and you have to work 100 times harder to win around, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was an interesting one, because the nature of the show was people weren't quite sure whether that was intentional or not. And that's like you say, it's one of the great things about theatre. Once you've got people on board with the show, if something like that does happen, you then have to actively convince them that that wasn't what you were planning to do. And we did afterwards, because we spoke to people as we were packing away the set, and they went, was that meant to happen? That was really good, that bit? And you go, yeah, there's 5 minutes more of the show, but we have to stop it.
Do you think then a lot of what you've done sounds very much like it relies quite heavily on audience engagement and working with the audience? How important do you think that is to live entertainment, that connection with the audience, even not just during the show, but after the show?
I think that it's not necessarily a priority in a direct sense. I don't think that every show has an obligation to refer to the audience and get them up on stage and incorporate them that way. I think that it's perfectly fine for there to be an effective fourth wall. But I do think that now that social media is so big and things like that, and it's become so easy to engage with people that you see in shows and things like that, I think that incorporating it into especially theatre work is a good idea. I think that if you can have aspects of the show that refer to the audience, it just makes them feel a bit more involved. And in the work I do, it is a priority. Because, in improvisation work, you need someone to improv off. And in our case, it is the audience, because, say, in the murder mystery shows, they're the ones asking the questions. So we have to you have to warm the audience up enough to the performers that they're happy to effectively go, oh, I'm in this as well. I need to give you the ammunition. And they'll spear us occasionally as well. We love it when they really go for us, because we can go for them back. And it does make every show unique. And I do think the audience member then can have a special sense of, this was my show, not a show I went to see.
It sounds like then that your career has been quite extensive and quite varied. I suppose most performers' careers are. Do you prefer touring shows, or do you prefer shows that are done in fixed locations?
It depends when you ask me, really. If I'm on a tour, I'd probably say a fixed location. And if I'm doing the same job for a long time at home, I'd often say a tour. I don't really have a preference, to be honest. I think it's good to have a varied CV, in the sense of you have toured before and you have done shows in a fixed location, because it never hurts to have extra experience. But yeah, for me, it does come in and out. It's just like when people ask you, and I'm sure you've been asked as well, do you prefer doing stage work or film work? And the answer I normally give is, at the moment, and then go one way or the other. So at the moment, I'd probably say film work, because stage work right now it's impossible to come by, because nobody can go to the theatre. And that means that people are working on Zoom and self-tapes more, and they're seeing themselves on film more. So yeah, honestly, to ask me tomorrow, I might give you a different answer.
Yeah. I'm fairly sure that obviously we had post-show Q&As when we did Christmas Carol. That was part of the format of the show we were doing. And I'm fairly sure we had those kind of questions come up. What show has been your favorite? It's always, it tends to be that cop out of, well, at the moment I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And
yeah,
it tends to be a common theme, doesn't it?
It does.
I seem to remember one question even was, how much money do you earn?
Oh yeah, commonly.
We have this perception, I suppose, that show business, that our entertainment industry is all about the glamour, all about the amazing stuff, and the reality seems to be a lot of hard work, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. I suppose it's different to what you see. most people watch TV and film more than they watch stage work. And the things that get the most exposure are the things with the biggest budgets, and the things with the biggest budgets do probably have the most kind of glamorous style to them, and the actors that people know best. So it's understandable that people would assume that actors make a lot of money because the actors they see all the time do. But yeah, it's a common thing we get asked, and you get asked it, I get asked it. And most of the time, I'm happy to say, to be honest, well, not that much from acting. It doesn't pay as much as you think.
And it is an awful lot of hard work, I'd say.
Yeah.
With that in mind, are there differences, do you think, like fundamental differences between entertainment in, say, a fixed location and entertainment when touring? Do you think there are any major differences there that you would say exist?
I think that from an acting point of view, I personally find it easier to vary a show when I'm on tour. I think it's because I mentally attach myself to, okay, this is a different location, it's a different place, it's a different audience, so the show is going to be different. Obviously, when you do a show in a fixed location, the vast majority of the audience is going to be different every time. So that it doesn't make any sense to think like that. But that's something that I would say. I can't think of any other hard and fast differences. I suppose I haven't done many shows that are resident in one place for a long time, so it's harder for me to say. But I think that just keeping it fresh can be a little bit harder from my personal point of view when you're in one location.
Is that because of that fixed location that nothing outwardly necessarily seems to change, or is that?
I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. I think it is literally a case of, you turn up one place and you do the show, and you turn up the next day in the same place, and I kind of go, right, let's do it again. Let's do the show again. But when I'm touring around, I go, right, we're now in a different place. We've got to do this show, but it's in a different place. And my mind goes to, obviously, it is the same show. The lines are the same. The characters are the same. The entrances and exits are the same. There's something about it that for me always goes, it's different because the stage is bigger or smaller or wider, or there's more audience, or the audience are kids this time. It's something that I shouldn't think, but it's a hard thing to switch off for me, I suppose.
I suppose there are the mechanics of when, for example, you did Scrooge, you had to walk around the audience. That in and of itself, the nature of that changes depending on what space you've got to work in.
Yeah.
Aside from that, there were some shows we would turn up and there would be lunch provided. There would be sandwiches, there would be snacks. Other places we turn up and we didn't get so much as a cup of tea. So there are fundamental differences, I suppose, in the way we see things. Yeah.
And sometimes it's not just the way we see it. Sometimes, like you say, there are huge differences in facilities and what space you've got. Sometimes we had amazing. I remember there was one all-girls school, and they had essentially like a balcony level to the hall, and the stage was enormous and fantastic. And there were other ones where you had effectively a small classroom in a porta cabin, but it was, on paper the same show, but we had to do things completely differently.
It helps with the mindset. I think it keeps it, as you said, it helps keep that fresh.
Yeah.
So looking ahead then and thinking forward, most performers and most entertainers, most people in this industry that I'm aware of, they're constantly training, they're constantly developing new skills. Is that true of yourself?
Yeah, I try to. Obviously, at the moment, we have a lot more time for that. But I suppose we have a lot more time. Whether we have time for that is up for debate. But yeah, we've got to do things to keep ourselves busy. Like I said, I spoke a bit of French in that murder mystery. I'm trying to work on my language at the moment. I've got Polish family, so I'm working on my Polish at the moment. Obviously, I'm being forced to work on my accents all the time because whenever I'm coaching someone else's, I have to be hyper aware of what mine sounds like. So that's something that I'm working on. And yeah, just at the moment, especially, I think a lot of people are going, since I have the time, I might as well X, which is an interesting way to arrive at learning a new skill. But I think it's a great thing that people are using this time to. And even if people, their mental health might not allow or their facilities might not allow, people are finding time to do things that they wouldn't have had a chance to do in a normal climate, which is great. And for me, I'm managing to get my fitness back up. I was a little bit poorly in December, and that meant my fitness took a bit of a knock. So that's helpful. But yeah, it's always really interesting peruse the Facebook groups and things like that and see what people are doing, what people are learning, languages and accents, and people are dancing, people are filming monologues all the time. And you do soak that up, I think.
Mm.
Are you looking at anything at the moment, skills-wise?
Oh, myself, I've been trying gently to do some VO work and sort of building my skills there. My mic technique is still not there, but I inherited a lovely movable adjustable desk, so I'm able to stand and have my desktop mic actually standing, so I don't need a separate arm and what have you. But it's one of those, that's where this show came from, I suppose. That's where a lot of these kind of things, a lot of these projects I'm doing come from. Is, as a creative, I don't think you ever stop still and go, I've got nothing to do. You have to find that next thing to be doing. Always reassessing, I suppose, where my career will go next. And I suppose that leads me quite nicely onto the question I would ask again, closing in on the end of our time, is, do you see your career evolving in the future and turning into something different, or do you see it remaining quite similar to what you're doing at the moment?
I think that the accent stuff, I didn't used to be particularly enamored to the online coaching. And to an extent, I'm still not. There are still barriers in place with it. It opens up a lot. Like, obviously, I can do this internationally now. I've got one client at the moment who lives in New York, and we can do this effortlessly. The hardware's a bit of a barrier. So if someone's microphone isn't particularly good, or their headphones aren't particularly good, or their internet, or my internet, which has happened a few times, fails, then that can make it awkward. But I have seen how easy it is for people all over the country, and, you know, in some cases all over the world, to access me that way. So I think my accent coaching will change, and it'll be online more. Acting, I don't like to guess, to be honest. I have some projects in theory lined up after this, but we don't know when after this starts yet. After this could be August, or it could be January, it could be later. I don't know about the industry at large. I think that there's a lot of talk of self-tapes basically becoming the new audition. Obviously, they existed before the virus happened, but now they're happening so prevalently that in some corners, people are saying, why don't we just do this all the time? So I think that might be a common thing. I think I might end up doing a lot more self-tapes. I hope I end up doing a lot more self-tapes.
A lot less travel can be involved in that, which can be helpful. But it's one of those, I find, I don't know whether the same is true of you, the industry turns so quickly. You know, it does turn on that sixpence. And I came into working with you and Lucy on like less than 24 hours notice. Somebody I'd gone to university with told me about this show. I called up the director, and the next day I was in the room rehearsing for it. And that reignited my career. You know, I owe a lot to that person. I owe a lot to that show, and to, for that matter, you and Lucy for the enjoyable experience that was that show. Well,
God knows that we owe you as well, because we would have been two people out of three otherwise.
It's one of those. I think this is the risks with touring, and it wasn't without its difficulties, we should say. You know, Lucy did a lot of hard work on that. She was our sole driver through that tour, and that was long, hard days. But you can find yourself doing something one day and completely different the next. And as you rightly say, we don't know where the industry is going. Yeah, I hope for my part, being outside of London, that self-tapes take off a bit more and they continue, because hey, it benefits me. Don't have to spend thousands of pounds going to London all the time. That would be good.
I think that it's self-tapes in particular are gonna. I don't think they're gonna explode, because I think it won't be an easily perceptible change now, given that everyone's been on Skype and Zoom for God knows how long anyway. I had a Zoom audition yesterday, and it felt like the most normal thing in the world, because we've been doing Zoom for the last few weeks. But yeah, I do think auditions in particular, if not performances, are going to move strongly in that direction.
Yeah. Well, this show, I've been tossing around the idea for it for years. And in fairness, I always saw it as being on a stage somewhere, filmed in like maybe a studio theatre. So a couple of cameras pointed at people. With the internet, with these pieces of software that are revealing themselves to me, they were always there, but it allows the flexibility to do something different creatively, which is a nice experience, I find.
Yeah, Absolutely.
As time is running on a bit and we don't have a huge amount of time left, is I'll move on to how I'm coming to close most of these interviews, and that is a questionnaire. I've been heavily inspired, I should say, by certain other interview shows. This is the same 6 questions I'm asking every person who comes on. So don't worry, these are just answers in the moment.
Okay.
We're going to start, though, with what is your favorite type of entertainment?
To perform or to watch?
Interpret the question how you want.
Okay, I'll go both ways in that case. To perform, I do think that it's live work, be that theatre on a stage or improv work, like the work I do in restaurants or wherever it might be, bouncing off people live, performing to people you can see. To watch, pretty much the same, I would say. I love the other side of that. I love being in an audience, especially when there's improv involved.
Okay. Then what is your least favourite type of entertainment?
Least favorite type of entertainment. It's hard to say because I haven't experienced that many. But I think that I really can't wait to be back in theatres watching people. I do think that theatre, which is held on Zoom and is a series of people on the same screen in little boxes, I just don't engage with it in the same way. I don't think it's a fault of the medium. I think I just can't engage with that. So I don't really gel with that.
That's a fair answer. What then do you think is the most valuable trait to a performer?
Adaptability, I would say. Being able to do something differently when asked or when forced, if the circumstances make you do it. And yeah, kind of a willingness to take on something new, whether that be new skills if asked, or you normally turn up at the theatre or on the set and get into costume and go, and someone goes, can you just do this for me? Can you just help with this? Just being able to say yes to do something new. I think it can help you immensely.
Mm-hmm. So what trait would you most value in a castmate, colleague, or collaborator?
What trait would I most value in a castmate, colleague, or collaborator? Openness, which is a bit like adaptability. So I suppose it's very similar to the last answer. Openness is quite a vague thing to say, I suppose. It means that when you are bouncing off someone in a rehearsal room, they give as much as they take, which is great. Especially if you're touring with somebody and you're with them long term, you want to be able to chat to them. So that's a really nice thing to have, kind of that approachability. And yeah, just a general kind of, we're all there to do the work, but aside of that, just after the work finishes, just sag a little bit and go, I'm really tired now. Do you want to chat? Do you want to have a drink? And just kind of the ability to kind of relate on a level other than just work.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one of those things. If you're trying out accents, for example, in a rehearsal room, you need to know that your colleagues are going to be open to it.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
To the unsuccessful attempts, as well as the successful ones.
You need the unsuccessful ones to make the successful ones successful. That wouldn't work on a t-shirt. Indeed.
Well, if you could learn one new skill, we've already touched on this, but if you could learn one new skill, what would it be?
I think I would say I would like to be able to sing. I'm not a singer, and it always absolutely amazes me when I hear someone who just nails it. One of the guys I toured with in Spells, the Science and Magic show, in fact, both the other cast members in that, and in fact, several of the crew in that were singers or trained in musical theatre. And I just get blown away by it. And it's just something that I'm sure that I could do if I put enough work and time and money and effort into it. But it just seems miles away. So if I could pick something, just go, I want to be good at that, I think it would have to be singing.
Interesting. What one thing would you like to most see change about the industry?
Is that post-virus?
Just in general.
Okay. I suppose post-virus, I'd like it to come back. That'd be nice. But in general, what would I like to see change about the industry? It feels a little bit unreasonable to say because I understand how monolithic a lot of productions are. but I would love a bit more transparency in the start to end process of making a production. What I kind of mean by that is, there's been campaigns on this. If people haven't got a casting, if you've asked them to audition and you've seen them and they haven't got it, tell them they haven't got it. If getting contracts out early and things like that. So I suppose it's all behind the scenes for me. But better communication between all aspects of a production, from the initial release of this is being cast to who's in the cast, because obviously these days that can be a dispute as well. All the way up to the production being finished. I just think people need to chat a little bit more, and there needs to be less kind of social media hubbub about things when it could be quite easily addressed by companies. I just think everyone should talk more about things.
Mm-hmm. Some interesting answers, and unfortunately I've designed the show in such a way that I really wish I could follow up on some of these questions, but I will refrain because that's not the format of the show.
You're bound by your own concept.
Indeed. We'll leave them where they are for now. But in all honesty, thank you very much, Ryan, for joining me. Before we say goodbye, before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to plug? Is there anywhere that we could find out more about your accent work and anything else you might be doing?
Yeah, so my website for my accent work is ryanogrady.co.uk. Nice and easy, and that's got how you contact me for Skype work. My online work's on Skype. It has in-person work as well. At the time of recording, that's not possible, but hopefully it will be soon. Group workshops and things like that. And my email address is on there if you want to contact me for anything specific. And that applies to not just individuals, but if this happens, if you're watching this and you run a company, you're putting together a production and you want a certain accent for that, love helping out with that as well. I've held workshops in the last few weeks on lots of American workshops, American accents, Liverpool, Manchester, Dublin, Belfast. We're doing Wales on this coming Saturday. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, have a look at my website. Acting wise, I believe there's a link to my show reel on that website as well. So have a look at that if you like.
Great stuff. Well, again, thank you very much for joining me today, Ryan. It's been a pleasure having you on. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I've loved it. Nice to talk to you again.
It is, and it's great to see you again as well after so long as well. For now, though, I should wrap up. So for everybody who has been watching, thank you very, very much for watching. If you like this, please check out more information about Offbook at offbook.co.uk. You can also like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching. And if you think anybody you know would enjoy this show, please do consider sharing the show with them. Thanks for now, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.